As he gets to that roof, they see him looking through the rangefinder, and one sniper team is looking at him, looking at them.
So here's the latest updates on the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which confirms a lot of my initial suspicions, which went against the way most people were looking at this. A lot of people focused on Secret Service. They made baseless claims without any evidence. They weren't watching the rooftop, and this was weird. Why wasn't somebody on the rooftop? And I right away recognized that there was some logic problems with making that assessment. And I quickly focused on law enforcement, the local law enforcement, and I said that will be the area of focus for me. Not that I would only focus on them, but in terms of if I were to speculate based on all the details that we have initially, my focus is on a breakdown with the local law enforcement. And then two critical questions, because ultimately the Secret Service is responsible for the security of the president. However, did the local law enforcement deviate from the instructions given to them by the Secret Service? Or did the Secret Service fail to identify a good plan that they either agreed with in terms of what the local law enforcement said they're going to do, or that they suggested to? So did the local law enforcement do as planned, as discussed with the Secret Service, or did they deviate? Also, was there a breakdown from an individual officer who may have made a fatal mistake? So with that being said, here's the latest update. So we now know that the shooter actually called his job or notified his job that he was going to take Saturday off. He also claimed that he's going to be back in on Sunday.
We know he purchased a 5-foot ladder that morning, Saturday, at 9 a.m. at Home Depot near his house. That ladder has never been found to date. But the investigation has developed that he climbed up onto an air conditioner handler, and you can see that they're all around these buildings, and then hoisted himself onto a very low roof that's in the center of that complex, almost kind of in a courtyard, which would have been away from the view of a lot of people.
So that is something that I brought up in my analysis. I pointed out the way these buildings are closely clustered together, and they had kind of these alleys in between. So a lot of spaces for him to hide. I also speculated about a potential path to the building where he could kind of go through the parking lot, come around the back. Now, even having police officers in that building, unless you have an officer on all four corners, right, there's no way that the officers can monitor the entire building. I hear people talking about drones. I'm not sure if they realize that those things have a battery life. I think the professional commercials, the drones can do 45 minutes. So I suppose if you spend enough money and have enough batteries, you could swap the batteries out, but that'll be very expensive. If 45 minutes a pop, this is a hours long event. I think drone usage would be more case by case basis, meaning the Secret Service could have benefited perhaps from them. What they would have had is some drones of their own, or have someone on their team that is a drone pilot, and the minute that they saw someone, they could use that to investigate. Let's continue.
Before that, and this is interesting, he had already attracted the attention of security people at the screening area for the rally. He had been walking by the magnetometers with a rangefinder in his hand. Now, a rangefinder is something that shooters use to measure the distance in long shots. Golfers use them too. Looks like a small pair of binoculars, but if you're a police officer or someone who knows about firearms, you'll know what that is when you see it. He was carrying it in his hand and kind of circling around the mag area. There's conflicting information as to whether he went through the mags, which means he was unarmed, but he had this in his hand and had to go through screening, or whether he just stayed outside, but they started looking at him. But then he leaves the area and goes out of view from that inner perimeter. So
again, leaning back on my analysis, I said the area of focus is everything that happened from the time that he arrived on location to getting to the building. I would want to know who saw him first. Who are all the people that saw him? Whether it's just regular civilians, police officers, Secret Service. So a key detail is a communications log. I would want to review the communication logs for every channel that was live on that day. The Secret Service main channel, law enforcement main channel. They probably had a shared channel for all the law enforcement to coordinate with, some kind of command line. I would want that log as well. Very critical to know who said what when. Match that up with actions taken by who and when. The first potential failure is they identified him and flagged him as somebody suspicious, and yet he was able to just walk away. However, at an event like this, there would have been multiple people that are suspicious. The trick is to identify an actual threat versus somebody who just looks weird. Therein comes the professionalism, the training, due diligence. For example, an officer could have approached this guy and had a brief conversation, similar to what they do when they pull you over on the road, and based on the question and answer sequence, they can identify whether this person looks suspicious. They know how to look for signs of a person being nervous, lack of eye contact, answers that are not making any sense. Why do you have this rangefinder? I'm just using it for fun. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. All right? And if you can get enough information, you can get potential probable cause to maybe detain the person, or at least you can report this to your command and assign someone to track this person if you feel that they're suspicious enough. Because obviously you have to respect the person's rights. If somebody acting a little weird, it's not enough to detain them or do anything. But depending on if you're getting enough red flags, there's certain things that could be done. So we'd want to know who saw this person first. What did they do exactly? What does their protocol tell them to do? Did they follow their protocol? Did they deviate from protocol?
That is just interesting that he was already on the radar a little bit, which happens often in these things. They look at somebody, then they leave the secure area. The rangefinder comes up again, though, because as he gets to that roof, they see him looking through the rangefinder, and one sniper team is looking at him, looking at them through the rangefinder. But this all...
Okay, once again, everyone was jumping to conclusions saying that the Secret Service were not paying attention or they weren't covering the roof. And now we find out that at least one of those two teams that was closer to Trump actually did a really good job, because they were able to identify this guy as suspicious, and they zoomed in, I guess, close enough to see he had a rangefinder, and they're like, what's up with this guy? Now, again, I want full communication logs, because did they just happen to see him, or did the person who flagged him as suspicious report it out to a shared channel, or whatever the means is, whatever the path is? If you reported it out and somehow that information got to the snipers and got their attention, so now they're looking around in that general area, and when they do that search, that focus search, because they have information that there might be an issue there, they pick up on this guy, right? Now, a lot of people that are internet experts, they have this idea of things are really black and white. A guy with a rangefinder or something that looks like a rangefinder, that's not something you're going to just start shooting, right? Definitely high alert, pay close attention. And also, you can't take the president off the stage every time you see something that looks weird. There has to be a minimum threshold at which you get to the point of, okay, we need to take action, right? So far, the only action that this dictates is observance, investigate, data accumulation. Who is this? What are they doing? What is that in their hand? What are their intentions? Is this person a threat? Some kind of coordinated effort, you hope, takes place between the Secret Service and the local law enforcement. Secret Service is far away, looking through a scope. Local law enforcement is local. They can be their eyes on the ground. This person, they can provide more details.
Now starts to happen very quickly, because now a police officer's coming up the ladder behind him. We know about that confrontation with the firearm. Then he comes up and fires that shot. Those sniper teams.
So there were two sniper teams, or two snipers inside the building on the second floor. That was local law enforcement. You had two Secret Service sniper teams local to Trump on those buildings. You also had some other offices near that building. So to the people who jumped to conclusions and said why this building wasn't covered, it's kind of obvious. Now, I didn't know that the building wasn't covered, but there was no reason for me to think that it wouldn't be covered, right? I'm not jumping automatically to a conspiratorial sort of mindset, right? I'm going to go with what is most likely to be true before I jump to unnecessary, they screwed up or they let it happen or whatever, right? So I'm going to assume the Secret Service, with their training, even though the organization had a lot of problems. So I don't have a lot of faith in the Secret Service, but When's the last time you heard about someone getting shot? Right? So clearly they're not completely useless. So I assumed a certain level of professionalism and that this is something too obvious for them to not point out and not focus on. And apparently my instincts were correct. The building was covered to multiple levels. Unfortunately, however, the two snipers that were in that building were focused on the area where Donald Trump was. So they were using that as a vantage point to view and provide surveillance to the actual event, right? So where the crowd was, as opposed to more focusing their attention locally to the building. So that would explain why they wouldn't see this guy coming up to the building. However, there were officers nearby, obviously, because one of them went up to try to confront the person and apparently fell down. Also, at the same time, we know Secret Service, as I had assumed, they were watching in the air. They were watching the building. They saw him. They were observing. But because I look at things a little more deeply than a lot of people talking about this, I realize, with putting myself in their shoes, simply seeing a guy on a roof is not enough information for them to take action. Right? Guy on the roof of a building where you know local law enforcement is there, right? This could be an officer. This could be some moron. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was more than one moron that was at this event. Some guy wanted to get some video footage or whatever. And it depends on what they're seeing, right? I mean, if they were able to see that he had a gun on him, then it's like, okay, either this person's law enforcement or this person's a threat, but we need to know before we take action. So they would have been radio traffic from Secret Service saying, what's going on with this? So their people know, and also the local law enforcement knows as well. Some kind of coordination between Secret Service and...
They're trying to determine and talking to each other about who is this guy? Is he law enforcement? Is he part of one of the other sniper teams that's supposed to be in that building? And then that first shot fires, and then everything goes very quickly. So we're learning.
Important part of what he said in the end, as I've stated in my previous videos with my assessment of the situation, the Secret Service did a really good job as far as the response. Now, I got to do some analysis of the taking him off the stage. There's a couple of problems with that, with Trump, with his head exposed and him doing the fist pump, putting him at risk. So those will be some issues there. But in terms of how quickly they responded and shielding him and getting him off the stage, getting him into an armored vehicle, getting him out of there. But more importantly, what I was focused on more was the sniper team. They responded very, very quickly. From the time that this guy started firing shots, he was dead pretty quickly, right? And it's not like, okay, he's a threat, he's firing shots, let's kill him. There is setting up for the shot, right? Now, if they saw him with a rangefinder below, then hopefully they would have noticed him popping up on top of the roof and potentially identifying it the same person, potentially. But that's a problem, because with the angle of the roof, right, and their potential vantage point, it might not be very clear who this person is, right? Because he's crawling on the roof, they would start to see the top of his head first, right? Did they get a good look of him before to recognize his face? Because just because you saw a threat on the ground, that doesn't mean that somebody you see, sticking their head out the window or crawling on the roof is the same guy. Being able to make that assessment is based on what they saw. We don't know how closely they could see him. Now, if they identified the rangefinder, I would think they saw him pretty closely. So in theory, they got a good look at his face. But again, we don't know. We don't know what they would have seen through their binoculars. But the bottom line is, the minute he started firing, he was quickly taken out. People have this idea that, they saw this guy with a gun and they let minutes go by and nobody did anything. But if you watch the videos, right, when they saw him on the roof, the people that were there, the audience members, right, when they saw him on the roof, he was just a guy on the roof, a weirdo on the roof. Now, definitely concerning, but it's just a guy on the roof, right? You don't hear anyone saying anything about guns until just before he starts firing, right? So it's not like people saw a guy with a gun on the roof, right, and then everyone just kind of hanging out and no big deal, right? What they saw was a guy on the roof, no gun. What's up? What's going on, guys? Law enforcement doesn't really know what's going on. Is it one of the sniper people? Is it like a maintenance person? Like, why is it some weirdo? Like, who's on the roof? Like, what's going on here, right? Gotta investigate. It's not magic. It's not like the minute they see him, they know who he is and what he's up to. That's, 20. Hindsight is 20. Was it 2020 is hindsight? I don't know. Whatever the expression is. It's not like George Bush. Fool me once, shame on me. Right? There's a process that needs to happen. Of course, we all know what happened now. We know that this guy was trying to kill Trump, or we assume he's trying to kill Trump. That's the next thing. We don't even know who he was trying to kill. And that's something no one else has considered. We all assumed that he's trying to kill Trump. And that is the thing about, I do analysis as a professional. I do it for a living. I've been doing it for over 20 years. Right? There's a certain procedure in terms of how you process information. And there are certain things like being careful of not making assumptions and sticking to what you know. We do not know the motive, therefore we do not know who the target was. So we could spend all this time trying to confirmation bias our way into a Trump assassination when, for all we know, he was not even the target. A bunch of other people got hit too. Maybe the person he was trying to kill, he killed them. Now that would be kind of wild. So if I were to speculate, I would speculate that he probably was trying to kill Trump. But that doesn't change the fact that we don't even know if Trump was a target. And almost no one commenting on this has even considered that. Everyone's just going along, oh, it's Trump trying to kill Trump, and they let it happen, or the Secret Service screwed up. There's a process to figuring things like this out. And a big part of that process is avoiding bias, avoiding confirmation bias very specifically. You don't have a feeling and you try to confirm that feeling. You try to look at the information neutrally and let the data take you where it goes. You can theorize. Like, I theorize that it's a law enforcement breakdown. That conclusion pretty quickly, but I don't have enough information to make that a conclusion. But I can speculate, right? But I separate my speculation about where the breakdown came from. I separate that from my assessment of what happened based on the facts on the ground. There's certain things that we know, and I would just use those things to come to an assessment. If I want to make a guess, then I go beyond that. I introduce some gut instinct. But initially, I start with what the facts are showing us. But even with that, there is tactic to utilize, be mindful of. Even if you are focused on the facts at hand and staying away from your feelings and, assumptions and something you saw on Twitter, you have to also put in the back of your mind that some of these facts may change. Some of the details we're given might be erroneous, right? That is another part of the danger of getting too confident about what really happened too early. Because we need time to flush out some of the mistakes in the reporting. Did he really have a rangefinder, or was it binoculars? Is he actually the guy that was seen by the metal detectors, or was it actually somebody else? Somebody mistakenly conveyed the wrong message. Somebody mentioned they saw somebody suspicious. Another person heard that they saw this guy, but it actually was another guy. We don't know that. Slow your roll. Breathe. Take your time. You've got to be calm and methodical about how you process information when you're trying to do an analysis of a situation where you don't have all the facts. This is what I do when I'm doing analysis of politics, and it's what I'm doing here. I did a video with a guy who's a sniper expert, and this guy is an expert who, another part of the analysis strategy is you definitely want to consult with an expert. I have the skills of analysis, but I would need to rely on a sniper, right, to fill in the technical details that I'm not aware of. There's some things I might not think of. But the sniper, their skill set is different, right? So this sniper that I looked at, he was thinking a little bit too emotionally. He was making assumptions, because that's not his skill set. His skill set is being a sniper, right? I also spoke to a friend of mine who's a Marine who has sniper experience, and he also was all over the place. He told me that they found the guy next to the teleprompters, and it was not outside by the metal detectors. He said to me people saw him with a gun long before he fired. He said to me there weren't snipers in the building. I think he also said they weren't watching the building or something like that. I mean, so many details that were incorrect, because his experience being a sniper does not qualify him do an investigation and try to figure out what happened here, right? I do investigations, investigations of a different type, but that is in my skill set. And part of my skill set is also investigating things that I don't have prior knowledge of. I can't get into too many details, but there was a scenario where there was a problem that I had at work that involved something that I had no training on. I didn't know how this thing worked. I didn't have the background. It was foreign to me. I know some basic fundamentals of how it probably worked, but I didn't have any training on the thing. And I'm supposed to fix something that I don't have any training on, and I was able to do so, right? Using certain analytical tactics that I've developed from over logical deduction, right? Establishing certain baselines, being able to identify certain patterns, not making assumptions. Without getting into too many details, one of the tricks that I used was I didn't have any training on how the thing that I was troubleshooting was supposed to work, but I had records of how it worked previously, right? And that was the baseline that I used to identify what now. Yesterday, this thing that I don't know anything about operated in this manner. Today, it's operating in this manner. What's the difference? When do I see a deviation from yesterday versus today? At that time is where I'm going to focus my attention. So whether you're a sniper, whether you're law enforcement, whatever your background is, if you're trying to figure out what happened here, the right way to do it is to have an analytical approach, which requires, again, putting aside your feelings, putting aside your assumptions, sticking to the facts while understanding that the facts may change. And I think an important thing that I do is also trying to put yourself in the shoes of the people there. You have to be the shooter, be the sniper, be them on that day at those times. And what do you see when you do that? That's really the only way to really fully try to understand and figure out what happened to that day. If you just loosely, I think the Secret Service, they weren't even watching the building, and then you get into all this conspiratorial, they let it happen, and they're probably trying to let Trump die, and this and that, and da-da-da. That's how you get into all that nonsense, right? That's emotional thinking. Anyway, this is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.